Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm talking about the full moon in Scorpio on the 27th of April, but I'm also going to be talking about the background to that full moon. What else is going on with the planets? Because of course, that makes a huge difference as to how a full moon or a new moon really manifests in terms of events and obviously important events in our own lives. First, I want to say hello to any of you who are new to my channel. And if you haven't subscribed, then please press the subscribe button and the notification button, because that way you will get an alert when a new video of mine comes out. And right now I'm working on a very new and special video, which you're not going to want to miss. Okay, so back to business. In my last video, I talked about April being a month of two halves. And for the first half of April, we were under a very kind of Plutonic, Neptunian vibe. And so things were very strange and, mistruths and missteps and, misunderstandings were par for the course. And also, I think we felt sometimes right up against a brick wall of opposition. That's why there were lots of protests and people feeling very unaddressed one way or the other. Well, things change halfway through the month. Well, in fact, they change really on the 19th of April, because that's when the sun enters Taurus. And if you're interested to know exactly when the sun enters the sign of Taurus, perhaps you've got a baby coming into the world and you want to know whether it's an Aries or it's a Taurian. Well, the time the sun enters Taurus on the 19th is 20:33. That's just after 8:30 UTC. Now, Uranus, as I said, places its signature on the second half of April. And Uranus is such a different entity from Pluto and Neptune. Couldn't be more different. With Uranus, we get sudden and unexpected change. We get revelations and revolutions. We get awakenings and all sorts of things that help us break new ground, whether we're talking about new ground and understanding, or whether quite literally we move into new territory, perhaps physically, maybe we move home. But Uranus takes us from one place to the other, but kind of abruptly. It is, interestingly enough, a planet of the higher self. And so a lot of the kind of Uranus activity that we get in our own charts is about really relating to who we really are. And I'll talk about that just a little bit later when I come to the end of my video. Now, for this full moon in Scorpio, it's important particularly for all the fixed signs. That means for Taurus, for Scorpio, for Leo and Aquarius. But it's important for any of you who have birthdays towards the end of the month or very early the next month. And this is because Uranus is affecting that sort of area of the zodiac. And it means that if your sun or moon or whatever connects with it, then you're in for that kind of Uranian experience. But certainly, if you have a birthday towards the end of April or the end of July or the end of October or the end of January, then you're right center stage of planet Uranus. And I will come to that shortly. I'll give you much more of an insight into what it all means. Now, this full moon has a relationship with the new moon in Scorpio of the 15th of November last year. So the new moon in Scorpio begins a 6-month cycle, of which the full moon in Scorpio, this 27th of April, completes. So go back in your mind to that period of November, mid-November period, and see what began there or what events happened at that time, because they'll have an echo towards the end of this month of April. It's particularly interesting when we align this idea to relationships or projects that we begin. We begin them around the time of a new moon. and we complete them at the time of the full moon. And sometimes that just means we complete a stage. We've gone so far, we have an assessment about it, and we move on, but perhaps with more intensity or in a different way, but we move forward. That 6-month point is crucial. Well, for this full moon on the 27th, there's another date I want you to keep in mind, and that is the full moon of the 31st of October last year. Now, the reason that this is interesting is that the full moon, so the sun was in Scorpio, the moon was in Uranus, was in Taurus, and Uranus was conjunct that full moon. In other words, we have the sun opposition moon Uranus. Whereas this time around, on the 27th of April, we have the sun in Taurus conjunct Uranus opposition the moon. And so these two dates, these periods are connected. And just to give you an idea, which might give you a sense of time, and that was just before the US election. And the interesting thing about that, because it's a point I want to make here, is that although we might feel the full moon effects on the day, and if we think about the moon's effect on the tides, how the tides ebb and flow according to the moon, or our emotional tides ebb and flow according to the moon as well. So we do tend to feel more emotional at full moon, whatever sign we are. But the important thing again is that this full moon is a symbol. It's symbolic of what's to come or what's happening at the time. So if we go back to the 31st of October last year, just before the US election, nothing particularly unusual happened on the 31st itself, but 3 days later, my goodness, what a shakeup. And of course, a whole lot of things which were very much to do with the idea of Uranian upsets and all those kind of things took us through the weeks after that full moon. And also, if we think again, the sun was opposition Uranus on the 31st of October, just before the election. And when we look at what happened when the sun conjoined Uranus, the sun squared Uranus in January, we had all those things going on really with the storming of the Capitol building and a whole lot more upheaval. So Uranus is obviously telling us a story about protest and change and that kind of the kind of experience we feel when we're not allowed to do what we want to do because of strong resistance or things we feel up against. That's very much the Uranus experience. And so that will color this full moon on the 27th, but it will make its way forward in time as well, because whatever happens around that time is emblematic of, future, the near future events. So let me come back really to dates that are important in the second half of April. First of all, we've got the 19th, which is when the sun comes into Taurus. Then we have the 23rd, when Venus is conjunct Uranus. We have the 24th, when Mercury is conjunct Uranus. The 27th, when the full moon is opposition Uranus. And then on the 30th of the month, the sun will be conjunct Uranus. So you can see why I'm calling this a month of two halves and focusing strongly on planet Uranus. So let me come back to those signs who I think really will respond to and be able to use in terms of your actions and your understandings at this full moon, because that's what it's all about. I mean, all full moons come with that theme of closure and completion. So we finish things, we close things off, we get things kind of sorted. And because this full moon is opposition Uranus, we've got Uranus in there, it means things come to an abrupt end. Things come to a sudden ending, and things change very quickly and go in a new direction. I think this idea of the full moon in Scorpio, just generally speaking, will have a lot to do with things like the economy, things to do with nursing, And also, I think its action is to bring things up to the light which have been buried. So this means, I suppose, secrets coming to light, getting more information that we need about certain things, and maybe a few scandals into the bargain. And of course, I'm looking a little bit more on the world stage when I'm talking about that. But for Taurus and Scorpio, Leo and Aquarius, this full moon is really important. Now, if you're a Taurus, the sun will be in your sign and the moon will be in your opposite sign. So we're looking at the seventh house. But the first house and the seventh house are called the relationship axis. So this full moon is about relationships, or it is about other people in your life and the impact other people have on your existence. So in a way, when we think about the sun being in the sign, we think about your independence, your feelings, your personal beliefs, and what you want to do personally versus what other people might want to have happen. And the whole business of, are we in union or are we poles apart? That's the theme of this full moon. So it's a good time to come together in the sense of trying to find consensus. But it's also a time, especially with Uranus there, that if we really can't find common ground, that's it. So I think some Taurians will face some kind of breakup around this time, whether that's in a romantic relationship or it's a friendship, or you leave a company, or you decide to do something that means it's an end to that particular journey. For Scorpio, we still have the relationship axis in focus, but here the moon is in your sign. And this means you are empowered. Already a very emotional and intuitive and passionate sign. This is the only full moon in your sign this year. So it is really significant. And especially if you have one of those late October birthdays, then it is super significant. So again, we have this theme of endings and beginnings, especially aligned to relationships. With the moon empowering you, it is both a time to respond to your emotions and to harness your emotions to your will, but it is not the time to let your emotions rule the day and therefore press any self-destruct buttons and perhaps sabotage a situation for no good reason. But again, we have the same similar relationship theme as we do with Taurus. We have the idea of, is there consensus? Is this a time to take that relationship forward, to become a unit? Or is it time to say, you know what? We are so poles apart. This is not for us anymore. So now we come to Leo and Aquarius. Now, this axis is the axis of life direction. So at the one end of it, and we're looking at Leo now, the full moon is in the area of home and family, while for Aquarius, the full moon is in the area of career and life goals. Imagine for a minute the horoscope as a tree. So you've got the roots going under the earth. We've got the tree itself, the branches going up into the sky as far as they can go. And you've also got the branches going out sideways. So really, in terms of our horoscope tree, we've got the roots of the tree representing our family, our ancestors, all that which has gone before. And the top of the tree, the midheaven, the 10th house, we're looking at where we want to go in life, our status, our social status, our career status, all those things that mean we're out in the world and we have a place out on the world stage. So for Leo, it's an important period for family relations. And when we think of this full moon aligned to Uranus, we're thinking about things must change. Maybe as I'm speaking to you, you know exactly what that means. You've either got cramped conditions or the whole family thing is getting on top of you and things must change. On the other hand, there could be some very unexpected news linked to the family. It could be a wonderful news, the birth of a baby or a wedding, something like that. But it could be something that is less wonderful, but it means that things will have to change in the wake of it. Now, if we come to Aquarius, the full moon is in the 10th house. So we're looking at things to do with your job, but things to do also with those ambitions you have. You know, I won't say it's a bucket list, but the things that we really want to do. Maybe you want to go on a holiday. Maybe you like to do a course on something. You aim to do certain things in your life. That's where we are in this area. And part of that area for a lot of people is your career, because your job defines you in the world. So here we've got change. So maybe you know that you're coming to the end of a job, and you know that you're moving on to something else, or maybe it is the end of the job, period, whether that's retirement or you've got to go seeking a new direction. But I like Uranus for that, because it means whatever's come to an end has done. It's appropriate. And it is most appropriate for you to head in very new directions. And I think also when we think about a full moon and the idea of drawing conclusions, and then we throw in Uranus and the idea of awakenings, the idea of coming to conclusions at this time from which, after you've thought about it, major decisions, you move on in a new direction is really, really important. So let's take a look at this full moon and explore, as I said at the beginning of my video, the idea of what is the setting that this full moon is to be set in. What is the background to it? And I think if you look here, I've drawn the full moon out for you so you can see the moon at the left-hand side of the circle, the ascendant point, and the sun at the opposite side. Now, what I've done here is as well, although I took this timing from Los Angeles, that's where I set the full moon, which of course means it happens the day before, it happens on the 26th. But I've used a whole sign system here. So we're not bothering really with an ascendant and a midheaven. We're just looking at how this full moon looks. And you'll see there's like a big funny triangle going, you know, from the side. We've got the moon and the sun and a few other planets, and they're all focusing on a point at the bottom of that circle. And that's where we see the planet Saturn. So that's really and truly important. That's another part of the story of this full moon. Look at the sun. It's connected to Uranus, Venus, and Mercury. So we've got what we call a stellium there. And that's why this is a very intense period of 2021. We've got a lot of things going off. I mean, a lot of protests, a lot of upsets, and a lot of radical U-turns. That's what this period is going to be all about. And we look at that full moon, and what it's bringing out is something that's been going on since the early part of this year, well, even since the latter part of last year, and that is the Saturn-Uranus square. You can see Saturn at the base there, and you can see Uranus, that television aerial just by the sun. These two planets have been 90 degrees away from each other really since the end of last year, and they'll be together in this kind of formation, loose formation, right through to the end of 2022. But they are really, really close together throughout this year. And when I think, in fact, I set myself the task of trying to explain to you what happens when you've got Saturn and Uranus at a hard angle to each other. It's a bit like taking a stick of dynamite to a cliff of granite. And I see a lot of that because, you know, I spend time in Sweden and they're forever blowing up granite cliffs with dynamite. And I know how long it takes, and also how powerful that is when it finally blows. And that's the metaphor really for Saturn and Uranus. Tremendous resistance against old systems, against the things that are relentlessly stuck, the things that we feel powerless to do anything about. And what happens with Uranus is there is a breakthrough, there is an upset, there is some dynamite thrown at it, and everything changes. That's the kind of metaphor for what we're looking at. And I think you might be able to trace that into your own life experience, to those situations you may have been dealing with for a very, very long time, and there seems to be no break in them at all. Look at this full moon, look at where Saturn is, look at those other planets. This is one of those points during this year when it can change and break. But of course, also we get that idea that at certain points, the tension feels at its greatest. So we get those world situations, those things that are building up a head of steam, and it just explodes. So we can expect to see also some pretty upsetting and violent kind of episodes during the second half of April and perhaps into the early part of May as well. What I also want to look at really, I think, in the way of Saturn, we do tend to think of Saturn as, you know, this kind of bogey, old fogey, preventing us from moving forward and always restraining us. And yes, that is part of Saturn's purpose. But also, it's Saturn is also a learning planet. And I think we as humanity have to learn every bit as much as we individuals have to learn, and we learn best through painful experience. So this is another message really in this full moon as well, whether we take that to be personal to us or that whether we look out on the world and see what's going on out there. So in conclusion, I thought about how I wanted to end this week, and what I thought about was the idea that sometimes we don't understand the significance of events at the time. We have to move forward, sometimes quite some distance, to be able to see what those events really meant and what they led to. And it is as if, really, since the beginning of 2020, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that eclipse, and the awareness of this, coronavirus, that life has been the way it has been for these past sort of 14, 15 months. And I think we're still not at a point where we can judge the significance and what it all meant in terms of all the things that came with the coronavirus. We're quite some way off that. But also the individual events that have happened may take, to us personally, may take quite a lot of time to set in the right context. So I thought about this, and I thought about every single one of us being on this journey. It's a very difficult transition period for mankind as a whole, and we're all making that journey. And I thought, what helps? Well, a few moments ago, I was talking about the Saturn-Uranus square and how difficult it is to get something to move, like dynamite and granite cliffs. But I think what keeps us sane, what is valuable in all of this, and what helps us to move forward successfully to be able to get to that point and look back and see what it all meant. It's about knowing who we are. It's about knowing what's real. It's about knowing our truth, if you like. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but very often when situations are all over the place, we do go hither and thither, this way and that. And perhaps we get very unsettled and we lose grasp of a situation, we lose our bearings. So the important thing is to know how we feel about it, where we are, what is it, what does this mean to me? And knowing that you are true to who you are is the point at which you can begin. And I was also reminded of, well, it's one of my favorite turns of phrase. This is the idea that when the rug gets pulled out from beneath you, learn to dance on a moving carpet. And I think that's very good advice. And I've certainly put it to good use over these last 18 months. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now. Take care.